Good afternoon, Britannia, and hello to the rest of the world. Welcome to 2CTV. Reform UK continue to go up in the opinion polls. The Tory party are running out of money, and the British bashing corporation, the BBC, are having a bit of an emotional breakdown. So they've decided to launch a political campaign against the Nigel Farage and Reform UK. In this video, I'm going to give you guys all the information that we have, and of course, we'll also have our 2CTV's legal experts, the barrister Stephen Barrett, coming on the channel to talk to us about this issue. Hello to everybody in the live chat. We'll get your reaction live as usual, as long as you're watching live. So, the BBC have decided to do something genius. They came up with it in a very creative way. They say, well, we can't really politically campaign for or against party, but in the name of journalism, we can just be biased against one party and nobody will notice. Very smart. But, or not, are fake accounts swaying, obviously, voters towards Reform UK? That's the headline. What they decided to do, you would think that these are just the fact checkers. Well, 2CTV have their own fact checkers. We're going to fact check the fact checkers. So, Marianna Spring. Some of you might already be familiar with this human being. Marianna Spring is in charge of BBC Verify. BBC Verify is a fact-checking program and hosted by the BBC. It's supposed to be holding everybody to account, but it primarily focuses on right-wingers, especially on social media, new media like 2CTV. They don't hold the government to account, they don't hold the establishment to account, they don't hold left-wing parties to account, but it's a very impartial fact-checking program, apparently. Marianna Spring did her research about all these social media accounts saying that we should vote Reform UK, vote Nigel and Reform, vote Reform UK, blah, blah, blah. And there's a lot of conspiracy theories saying, well, what if these are all fake accounts? These are all bots, and somehow Reform UK have gained access to so much money that they are using it on bots instead of actually using it on normal campaigning. So the interesting thing about this is that I'm going to show you a clip before Stephen Barrett comes on the show. It gets funnier. The introduction to this segment, just be patient. I know I'm going to show you a clip from the BBC. Just be patient. It's actually worth it. The presenter decided to say, basically, it's all about forming a question. If you just ask in question forms, everything's fine. You're not being biased, right? But we know they're being biased. The introduction to the segment shows, well, clearly there are bot accounts. But then it kind of backfires on the BBC. Watch this.
Are fake social media accounts influencing the general election? Well, allegations about inauthentic accounts distorting the social media conversations are popping up across the online world. The BBC's disinformation and social media correspondent Marianna Spring has been tracking down the people behind the profiles, posting hundreds of Reform UK comments. Marianna. She's been cracking on. And only Reform UK. Not the Labour Party, not the Lib Dems, not the Tories, not the Greens. No, just Reform UK. Because there are bot accounts influencing the election. This is just the usual nonsense that they come up with. But then, when you listen to what Marianna Spring's research actually concluded, it kind of backfired on the BBC because she thought these are all fake accounts. Turn out to be real people who are just sick and tired of the establishment, and they decided to stay anonymous because they're scared of the backlash, because BBC would cancel them by exposing them and they could get fired from their employment. That's why people are having anonymous accounts or not really their real names. Let's go to Marianna Spring confirming that these are actually real people.
Find some real people behind these types of comments though, like Martin. He told me he's just fed up with MPs and wants to vote Reform. A spokesperson for Reform UK said they're delighted about the organic growth of online support and said people wrongly think Reform UK supporters must be fake. TikTok, X and Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram, all said they don't allow fake accounts. Back to you, Rita.
Marianna, thank you.
So the whole thing backfired. Absolutely. You know what? It's absolutely fascinating. Mostly because Paul, just to put in the live chat, put number one, if you think Maya will say it's absolutely fascinating. It is absolutely fascinating, Paul. Indeed. Because they think we're stupid. They think we're absolute idiots. So, okay, there's one thing to focus on what they're doing now, this political campaign that they think they're getting away with by simply focusing on Reform UK and Nigel Farage, it simply shows that the whole of the establishment are freaking out. So the Tories, obviously, they don't know what they're doing. The Labour Party have started already on social media focusing on reform instead of focusing on the Tories, because there's no need to even attack the Conservatives. The whole country already agrees on that front. The BBC and the rest of the media cabal are going to be starting this attack as well. That's one issue. Second problem is, and I have talked about BBC Verify and Mariana Spring on this channel quite a long. We know that we have a problem with these people because they're not even being professional, let alone impartial. That's one thing. But I've decided to have our own fact checkers. So, introducing our disinformation correspondent, Bamban, who will be fact checking the fact checkers at the BBC, and Bamban will be with us regularly to help us with this campaign. Now, jokes aside, going back to the corporate media and corporate backed media, GB News. Oh, you get ready for this. Okay. The way the media works, and also Ofcom, they tend to have panelists with their biased opinions, and they have to make sure that both sides are being represented, right? And they tell you these are basically opinion-based panelists, just listen to their opinions. Fair enough. At times, when they have political programs, they bring in experts or pundits, and even if they are left-leaning or right-leaning or liberal-leaning or whatever they are, they tend to pretend to be objective. They try their best to be objective. They do. Some of them are good. Some of them are professional, although they still talk nonsense. It's just boring Westminster jargon. But they try to be, they're told you're there to do objective analysis. GB News had this guy, can't even remember his name now, who was not a opinion panelist. It was just one person as the pundit to analyse what's going on with Reform UK. He spent the whole time attacking Nigel Farage and Reform UK with no substance. There was no analysis. And in fact, you had the presenter saying, but isn't it true that people are turning towards Nigel Farage? And he was saying, yeah, people are being lied to. People are stupid. I'm like, you can't do that. You can't, GB News or any of the corporate-backed medias, you cannot have a pundit that you told us is going to be objective and just an analyst, just be a pundit, and then do this. But we are where we are. We have now our legal expert, Stephen Barrett, joining us live. Let's bring him on the channel, on the channel. Obviously, it's just going to take a quick while to actually connect him. We're going to get Stephen to tell us about what's exactly going on with this nonsense, because I have a feeling one thing is about the media's opinions, one thing is about when they pretend to be factual. I don't think people have a problem with bias. People have a problem with you being dishonest. Okay, so Barrett on the line. Hello, Stephen. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I believe you were just on the rival channel GB News. How was that?
That was lovely. There's no need to be unkind.
No, I'm not.
Martin Daubney has a genuine interest in law. I love it when people, as do you. But because I do care about law so much, it's lovely to talk to journalists who actually care about it, rather than, I have been on shows with people who just sort of sit there blankly and don't have a clue what I'm talking. Think I'm some sort of a lunatic. But
I know.
It's nice to be able to talk law with people who are interested in it.
Yeah, so let's take it towards the issue of this BBC thing. You actually posted on social media earlier today as well about this. One thing I want to focus on is obviously the BBC themselves, and of course the cultural media, so Ofcom, which basically brings you into it as someone who obviously has a legal brain, because we talk about this all the time, me and you, in terms of we do live in a rule-based society instead of having a father figure or dictator telling us what to do or making up rules. But then it seems like these rules can be either bent or translated in a different way, let's just say. And the BBC will be getting away with this because they haven't done anything illegal. But we know exactly what they're doing. They're basically launching a campaign against one party instead of focusing on all the parties, right?
Yes. And this is because the law itself has got itself into a terrible way. Yep. So you kill law by having too many words. Yep. And this sort of truth was no. So I'm from the Chancery Bar, It is the stuffiest and most old-fashioned bits of the bar, but that's fine. So there were people there that when I was a young man who were in their 90s and who had been chancery lawyers for a long time, and people who remembered a great deal of collective memory going back hundreds of years, and then it was simply an accepted truth that the most important thing in law was to have as few words as possible, because the fewer words you have, the more clear your messages. And I don't know, I've seen this on Twitter. I don't know your view on this, but if I deliberately send really short tweets now, and they do much better because they're just clear. People are like, I know exactly what that means. He's not in, no ambiguity, bish, bash, bosh, off we go.
I think, to interrupt, this is exactly what Nigel is doing during the debates compared to like the other party leaders. They just talk and talk and talk. You don't even know where they were going with that. And Nigel says, wrong, and one word.
Yes, well, Tony Blair was the architect of the opposite approach. So if you read anything by his institution put out as a document, the first thing I'll tell you is that it'll be inanely long. I mean, just page after page after page. And most of it is just a sort of soporific effect of sort of putting you to sleep and making you not want to challenge things and think things through. The EU makes law in this way too. And it's very unhelpful. I mean, I don't know whether that's effective for winning elections. I mean, Tony Blair won 3, so fine. But that,
maybe it worked back then, but not anymore. Maybe it worked back then. I don't know.
Well, maybe, but as a political tactic, it is what it is. As law, it's rubbish. It just destroys good law. You just haven't got a slightest clue. So it started with the 2003 Communications Act, which is sort of half EU, half our own civil servants drafted it. And I've spent hours reading the Communications Act 2003, trying to make it make sense. And I can't make it make sense. But if there was any world in which the 2003 Act itself was clear, what then happens is Ofcom gets to write reams of extra law on top of it. It's got all these powers to write all these policies. So then you, as well as the sort of the 2003 Communications Act, which is a book, you then get Ofcom coming out with a series of volumes, and everybody's sort of swimming through this. And if you look at, I mean, the one thing that I focus on, because I think it is causing real structural issues in our country, is the definition of impartiality. And they basically said, things can happen except when they can't.
Yeah,
that's the law. Yeah, that's not law. That's gibberish. That's just complete ineffectual nonsense. As a result, they're not effectively regulating the market. What they're doing, you don't ever know whether they are ideologically with the mob or not, because the effect doesn't matter. What they don't want to do is to upset the mob. The mob dislikes GB News, so Ofcom knows if it attacks GB News, I'll be more popular. I'm more likely to keep my cushy job. I'm more likely to survive.
With this BBC thing, sorry, with this BBC thing, it's quite interesting because there's one thing that you're talking about, which is Ofcom and the culture of Ofcom and that part of the establishment. But the BBC also have the mechanism and also restrictions on itself when it comes to the Royal Charter. Seems like they've also managed to kind of work around the existing Royal Charter, BBC Charter, to be able to, for example, have these programs. BBC Verify, that basically comes out just to attack Nigel Farage, no other party. And it's the same bit that they've done since they created this department, BBC Verify. As a fact-checking department, they primarily, and they say that, focus on right-wing voices, social media accounts, new media accounts. They don't hold the government to account. They don't hold the other parties to account. They don't hold the other channels to account. Why is it that it's acceptable, apparently?
It isn't. It isn't. And if impartiality functioned, it would not be allowed at all. But what it is it's this phenomena I've identified, that this idea of philosopher princes, this Platoist idea that power should be concentrated in the hands of a small number of people. And, the BBC want to be one of the small numbers of people who concentrate powers who hold power in our society. And so they're doing this because they want to hold power. If you can define what truth is, if you get to, and Labour's doing it in its manifesto, it's got a morality police, which I'm, a concept I know you're well aware of, but, they will control what is and isn't moral. They will control what is and isn't ethical. What an immense level of power that will be. They'll be able to literally, get MPs removed. This is insane. This is not democracy. And it's because we've become a very infantilized, childlike state. And we all have, to an extent. We've all forgotten what it is to be a grown up. I mean, there's a lot of I mean, it went with Princess Diana's death, but, the idea that grown-ups control their emotions is long gone. And so on a daily basis, I will see grown-ups out and about displaying emotions that they really shouldn't, because it's very damaging to children and it's very damaging to society.
Well, I think the reason that is happening is society is becoming, I was going to say emotional, but obviously we all have emotions, but irrationally emotional. I think it's also because when it comes to politics, it's mostly because, people say, oh, people don't focus on facts, they focus on feelings, but it's beyond that. I think we've kind of been dependent on the grown-ups, the state and politicians. We don't really think for ourselves. We don't even know the law that applies to us and our rights. So we become emotional when it comes to reaction instead of actually being rational about it. And if we had understood law, it would help. And actually, Stephen, yourself, you apparently have a show on a channel called 2CTV Plus. It's called Due Process, I believe, and it focuses on law, right? Tell us about that, in case people haven't watched it.
It does, and that's just the idea that if I can teach everybody law, they will be empowered. Because I have a man. So the people who believe that a small group of people should hold power, and the people who hate democracy, they think that everybody's thick. Okay, that's their view. And my view is that people aren't in any way stupid, that most people are really quite savvy and switched on. What they are is not told about law. I mean, the Victorians used to put law in the newspapers. So you'd sit down over your Sunday, morning breakfast, and everybody would read the law and go, oh, I don't think that's very well drafted. I shall write a letter to the Times and tell them. But we used to be empowered to do that. Now MPs don't even read the law. That's just insane. And we have to go back to this grown-up idea that we are powerful, that our vote matters, and that we're not stupid morons to be pushed around and, fed bread and circuses. I mean, by the way, none of this is new. This has been the phrase bread and circuses is 2,000 years old. These concepts that we're all a bit thick and can be controlled by a dictator, have been with us. And if we're not careful, they become true. I mean, I like to think that we're actually, particularly, the inhabitants of this island, just simply too rebellious to be controlled by a dictator. And I like to see a bit of rebellion in us. And every time I think, so if you sort of find people just being pointlessly rebellious, like I'll do it sometimes. I'll just refuse to use the self-service checkout. And I'll just stand there until somebody comes and mans the till, and I'm just like, and I feel sort of proud of myself. I feel like a sort of noble, Anglo-Saxon just standing up to the man.
We always talk about it, the Anglo-Saxons, and now the Brits are not revolutionary anyway, but we always made it work. So like literally 2 weeks ago, even people like me were saying, so what's happening now? The establishment disconnect with the people. There seem to be no options for them for this election. And I was like, well, some people were saying, no, we're going to revolt. I was like, that's not going to happen. But then the Brits always, it's like the blood of this culture finds a way. So obviously there were always plans for Nigel and Reform UK, but it seems like it all works out. I'm not saying that Reform UK and Nigel Farage are now going to form the new Conservative Party, they're going to be in government, but at least when there's appetite, there will be the supply to prevent the actual uprising. And I mean, never say never. Let's not be complacent. But we have prevented, apart from 10 minutes when we did the revolution, then we regretted that with Cromwell. Apart from that, and that's not, I don't really call it a popular revolution. That was just more of a coup. That was establishment against establishment. It wasn't really the masses getting on the streets. But I do want to obviously focus on that. And of course, guys, this is the Due Process on 2CTV Plus with Stephen Barrett. Of course, if you want to understand your rights. And of course, he also makes it fun, it's a very nerdy topic, but somebody made it.
Will you stop filming me in high definition? Because I do not want to see those wrinkles. I do not want them seen.
Yes, guys, go on 2C.tv. The link is in the description. Sign up to 2CTV Plus to get access to all our premium shows. From next week, we're going to be coming back with more shows. And actually, I need to talk to Stephen and see what day he's actually free next week. So I'll talk to him later. Thank you again, Stephen, for coming on the show. Okay, guys, let's go back to this. There we go. I'm better now. The microphone. Let's focus on this now. I want to get your reaction on this story about the BBC, obviously, because it is ridiculous. And while I also said, as one of the guys said in the live chat, it is absolutely fascinating because none of it makes sense. We're kind of used to the establishment showing their biases now compared to before. But it feels like they are showing off. It feels like they're taunting us, saying you can't do anything about it. We are untouchable. And I think they genuinely believe they're not touchable. They're untouchable. They genuinely do not believe that there is a threat coming from 2CTV, coming from grassroots political movements and new media channels and everything else. Like you had in Wales, the establishment in Wales, in the so-called Welsh Assembly, going after one of the new media channels, Voice of Wales, that some of you are familiar with, good friends of mine, and because they thought that they could just crush their little people. But they just made Voice of Wales a bigger channel than it was already at the time. It's crazy. Zed says, love you, Maya. You are awesome and your work here is critical. Thank you, mate. Thank you so much. Kim says, more Stephen Barrett, please. Well, you have to sign up to 2CTV Plus to get access to all his shows. He does make it, as I always joke, a very, very nerdy, geeky topic of law. He makes it fun, which is a bit of a talent for himself. I mean, he's a barrister. He can talk for hours. Barristers and Islamic preachers, imams, can talk for hours. And Maya Tusi. There are 3 categories of people who can talk and talk and talk non-stop without saying much. Anyway, actually barristers do say something. Andy says, as if it matters, the BBC is a joke. Well, this is the whole point. We know it's a joke, but they do hold the main frame of the culture, the society when it comes to politics. There are still a lot of people who believe that the BBC is credible. I know you might not believe it, but there are a few people left. And these people, some of them are good people. They've just been sent to terrible, terrible grammar schools or independent schools or bad state schools. And they basically become so complacent in their own society that they genuinely believe the BBC is still the same BBC from the 50s. Not that the 50s BBC was also that great, but it was at least a little bit better than this. But we are where we are with this because one of the main issues we're currently facing is the reaction to every single thing that's happened when it comes to the recent opinion polls in politics, in this election. There is actually, in fact, a poll that came out. It shows party channel by channel. So it's got the GB News viewers, it's got the BBC viewers, and of course all the others. If I could find it, that it was a very fascinating thing because I did say fascinating again, because the pundits. What is the name of the guy? News agents guy, the boring one, the podcast, but the boring one. John Sopel, yeah, John, who used to be BBC himself. He posted this. I'm going to show you what happened. This is just the weirdest thing ever. So there are like 4 different opinion polls, right? Sam Coates of Sky News posted this. And he's obviously from Sky, and John Sopel used to be BBC. I'm just going to show you the classic bias situation we are having with these guys. All right. First, Sam Coates of Sky News posted this saying, voting intentions by broadcaster. Look how GB News is very different to Sky, BBC and ITV, right? Because it's promoting conservatism apparently, right? I'm going to show you the details because, yeah, it makes sense that GB News viewers are primarily more right-leaning or against establishments, right? But the accusation is that apparently they are the only echo chamber. Well, that's not really true, and I'm going to prove this right here. So, on the one hand, we have GB News. 60% of the viewers believe Reform UK are better. Cool. Echo chamber towards the right. 2 days ago they were saying it's Tory, now they're saying it's Reform. BBC is also an echo chamber, 43% Labour. Look at... How is that going to be any accurate compared to all the others? You have to compare them all together. And of course, you had John Sopel, who had a bit of a very, very interesting moment, agreeing with his mainstream colleague, Sam Coates. It's like they don't get it. Let me show you what he said. Fascinating. See, John Sopel says fascinating. It's not just me. Fascinating and alarming in equal measure. This is in a 4 charts. Is in danger of the foxification of British TV, like Fox News. On ITV, Sky and BBC, you have more or less the same voting intentions of viewers. GB News is 60% pro-reform. But then, they don't really show Channel 4. I have the data for Channel 4, ladies and gentlemen. These guys purposefully showed you just ITV, Sky and BBC, which is the viewers are basically more mainstream anyway. This is Channel 4. 54% Labour. Channel 4 viewers. 15% Tory, 9% Reform, 9% Lib Dems, and 10% others, and all the 54% Labour. Why is Sam Coates or John Sopel are not showing you the other echo chamber from the other side? Channel 4. Echo chamber towards the Labour Party. This is, you could say, echo chamber towards Reform. This is towards the Labour Party. Because they love to go on those channels. It's a gravy train. They are the mafia in the media. Laurie, thank you for your super chat saying, hope you are better, Maya. And come on, Scotland. Sure. Anyone but Germany. Tonight's the first game of Euros, in case you didn't know. SD says, who gives a flying frig about what the BBC says? Because there are enough people who will be influenced by it, and every single vote matters. Just because you don't care or I don't care doesn't mean the others don't care. These people are being brainwashed by the BBC. They are so desperate for views that they will be reporting that there is a T-Rex running around Soho next week. There are folks that are gullible nowadays that they even bother to listen. But yes, that's what they do. So the BBC viewership is still high, relatively, compared to Sky News and all the others, because BBC is part of the furniture. Anywhere you go, it's just on in the background, from offices, receptions, to the NHS and all the others. So it's like they're forced to watch it. So they eventually end up influencing a few people, and it matters. It's also not right. Why are we paying for it? I mean, I don't pay for it, but why do the other people pay for it? James says the BBC have to keep that TV license rolling somehow, don't they? Exactly. And Julie says the left and the BCC, is that BBC? I think it's BBC, are incredibly detached from reality. And you're right. Good people do believe it. Dangerous. Exactly. See, Julie gets it. And Rami says, keep exposing them, Maya. Respect and love from Lebanon. Go Lebanon. Also, keep exposing Al Jazeera. Oh, yeah. The filthiest TV ever spreading hate to the world. Well, welcome to 2CTV. Rami from Lebanon. Of course, I can tell. A Christian, a sound, sensible Christian from Lebanon. I love the Lebanese. Oh, and also the food. Oh, the food is good. Go Lebanon. And another one said, maybe we should listen and vote in Suspir Charter, not a chance. There is a point to be made about, by the way, any sort of accountability, if it's about the connection between normal people and the plebs like us, and having some sort of access to power, whether it's to hire and fire them, vote them in, vote them out, or whatever. There's a problem with crime goes, faceless bureaucrats, all these bodies that have we have no say. The NHS is run by the NHS headquarters, NHS England, for example, and they have a boss. And we are told that if something goes wrong, you have to attack the Secretary of State for Health. That's just a lie. They do that as a scapegoat to distract you. So if you're angry, you say, let's replace the current health secretary. Yeah, I feel better now. Now the NHS is going to be fixed. No, it doesn't. That's not how it works. The health secretary or even the prime minister don't even run the NHS. It's the actual bureaucrats. It's the head of the NHS that's in charge of the actual day-to-day operations. The government could give them more money. That's basically all they can do, or come up with big reforms. But in terms of the everyday stuff, they have no say. But they want you to think, if you get rid of the prime minister or this minister or the other minister, everything is going to be fine. No, it doesn't. That's not how it works. The system is run by faceless bureaucrats. That is the reality. They told us we have no dictatorship, but we have a faceless dictatorship. It's not tyranny. They're not forcing you to do something, but they're just not doing anything. They're not fixing any of the problems. You guys might be watching from abroad. You might be shocked to hear that potholes on the roads and the streets. You drive your car and the whole thing collapses because full of potholes. They can't even fix potholes on the road, let alone the healthcare system or the teaching and all. And then somehow there are still people from around the world who want to come to the UK. I mean, nothing works anymore. There's the population explosion going on, And there will be eventually places that could be liberated again and could be reformed again. For example, Iran, after the Islamic occupiers, could be kicked out. Maybe Syria could reform itself eventually. Lebanon has a lot of potential. There's so many places that eventually you're going to have people from the West moving there. And I'm not talking about 5 years or 10 years. I'm talking about 50 years, 30 years. Eventually it's going to happen. Unless we wake up and fix ourselves, you're going to have a situation where Westerners are going to go to Asia and Far East. There are so many places that some people in the West will be happier to be there than here. But that's not the solution. You don't want people to keep moving around en masse. It's not really a good idea. Just stay in one place, fix your country, and cooperate with your partners and neighbors. Anyway, we're going to have a couple of other things to talk about later on. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Maya Tusi, and we are the media.